Well, I've been getting lots of emails about this gadget. This is the new Hasselblad X2D II, which does sound like a droid from Star Wars. And I've actually been putting it through its paces for the last couple of months. So in this video, I wanted to just explain to you what I thought to the new camera and the new 35 to 100mm lens, and how it compares to its predecessor, the X2D, which, as you know, I've been shooting with for a couple of years. And I'm going to say a couple of things that I don't think Hasselblad will be too happy to hear, but you know me, I'm just going to give it to you straight, warts and all. Now, to keep things a bit different to all the other channels, I thought it might be fun if what I did was just scrolled through the Hasselblad website where they've got all the promotional materials and blurb for this camera, go through all of the sales features, and then explain to you my real world experience with how all of these pan out. So let's just scroll down, we'll go past all of this business and straight down to one of the main features, which is this AFC continuous autofocus. So in my tests, photographing my wife and photographing the cats and a squirrel in the backyard, I have to say I was blown away by the continuous autofocus. So the camera did a really good job of tracking the subject overall and tracking the eye in addition to the subject. So you really got a good display showing you the tracking in real time. It is a major upgrade from the X2D. Alright, now let's talk about the HDR feature of this camera. And I'll confess that when Hasselblad first talked to me about the new features, I thought that the whole HDR thing was a bit of a nothing burger, because like many of you, I just thought of HDR as like, remember those Photomatics HDR images? And even when it was done well, where you would blend 3 or 5 exposures together in Lightroom or any HDR blending app, you would get a result sometimes that wouldn't look quite natural. Well, this is nothing to do with that. This is the new technology of HDR that you're now seeing in televisions, displays, phones, laptops, tablets. In fact, it's been out for a few years, and I'll be honest, I've been lagging behind with this new technology. So when Hasselblad tried to explain to me what it was all about, I didn't quite get it until I found this website by Greg Benz. Now, with this website and this tutorial video by Greg, he basically explains the new wave of HDR displays and how that relates to your photography. I'll probably butcher this explanation, but in a nutshell, this new generation of displays that are starting to take over will display more light in the highlights and more contrast overall, making your images look absolutely fantastic. And until you actually see it demonstrated on a HDR display, you won't really get it. But when you see it, you'll realize, wow, this is absolutely spectacular, and you'll start to get into HDR photography. Now, Greg explains all of this in depth in his tutorial, and he even shows you how you can convert a RAW file into a 32-bit HDR image with 3 to 4 stops extra dynamic range. So you can already do this kind of thing with the images that you've got. But what Hasselblad has managed to do with this camera is give you an end-to-end HDR solution, meaning that the camera itself will shoot a HDR image and then display that HDR image with the EVF and the screen on the back, which is a HDR display. And then you can edit that HDR image on your HDR display device using the Focus Mobile 2 app, so that it never really leaves the HDR realm. Now, this is all well and good, but to me it falls down a little bit because this Focus Mobile 2 software to me has 2 issues. Number one, it's only available on Apple devices, which I don't have. My phone's a Google Android phone, so I can't use this. And then the second thing is, do I really want to be editing my beautiful 100 megapixel file on a little crappy screen? even if it is HDR? No, I don't. So I'm not sure that I would ever adopt the Focus Mobile 2 app, and I've tried Focus on my laptop, and I've got to say I really don't enjoy the interface at all. It's certainly not an app that's good enough to lure me away from the editing software that I use right now. But kudos to Hasselblad for really embracing this HDR technology. Now, if Hasselblad is watching this video, what I would suggest is that you send one of these cameras to Greg Benz and let him do some experimentation with it, but most importantly, he might be able to put out some educational materials there that will educate me and the viewers as to why we would want to embrace this new technology. All right, on to the next feature, this two-way touch tilt screen. So I must admit, I do like this. So look at that, you can do that now. So that's really useful for when you've got your camera really low to the ground and you're just looking down at that, you can't get your beak through the EVF. I love that. I mean, the old one's not too bad either. This is the old one, but obviously it's not quite as good. Look at that. Ooh, you didn't hear that cracking sound. Oh God, did I just break that? Let's just pretend that didn't happen. So that's a nice little upgrade, but again, I'm not sure if that's enough to lure people to upgrade the old version to the new version. All right, what's the next big feature? All right, this 5-axis 10-stop image stabilization. So in my tests, I found that I could not quite achieve the same results that some of these other photographers that I've seen online are getting. I saw a video the other day where a guy was getting, I think it was almost 3 seconds, handheld, long exposure, and it was still super sharp. In my tests, the longest exposure I was able to get was about 0.6 seconds, which is marginally better than the previous model, the X2D. So I wasn't able to see those amazing results that some other photographers are achieving, and maybe that's because this is a pre-production test model. Maybe I've got an outdated firmware version. I don't know the reasons why, but my hands are pretty steady. I do this for a living, so I don't know why I couldn't get the same results as some of these other photographers. Now, having said that, this camera, this model in particular, has to go back to Hasselblad. Maybe in the future they'll send me a loaner of a production model. If they do, and I get those really long exposures, if I get those same results, of course, I'll let you know and I'll put it in a future video. But for now, as I said, 0.6 seconds was the maximum I was able to get, and that was testing with a multitude of different lenses. Now, of course, just like the previous version, it's still got that 1 terabyte internal SSD, which I absolutely love. And of course, you could put a CF Express Type B card in it as well. All right, now let's get on to this refined appearance. So it does look really classy. It's a nice looking camera. However, one grumble that I had with Hasselblad when they were asking me what I thought about the camera was this very plasticky textured grip. It just doesn't look as classy or as refined as I would like it to look. Now, in practical terms, it's brilliant. It's super grippy. It is very, very practical. It just doesn't look pretty. It kind of looks like a 1980s guitar amplifier that used to have that adhesive faux leather wrap around it, which would peel over time. This kind of looks like a rubberized version of that. So not that pretty to look at, but extremely grippy. And therefore, I guess that's probably more important than it looking beautiful, but being slippery. What's next? All right, yes, the 5D joystick and custom buttons. So you've got, I think, 2 custom buttons. You've got this one here, which you can assign pretty much anything to, and then you've got this new one at the front, which is just the dial. You can push it in and use that as a button. So those are great, but what I really love is this joystick here. This is absolutely fantastic. And this is one of the things that I asked Hasselblad for a couple of years ago when they sent me a questionnaire. What would you like to see in the new version? And really, all that I actually use this for is when I zoom into an image on playback and I'm looking through the EVF, what I used to have to do was use my finger and I'd look through the EVF and I'd be poking the screen around to try and change where my zoomed in focus point was, and inevitably it would end up in my nose, which is it's never good, especially when you're on a workshop and someone turns around, it looks like you're picking your nose. So now what I can do is just look through the EVF and move the joystick around so that I can just double check that autofocus to make sure I've got it perfect every time. And if you're wondering why my thumb is black, it's because I trapped it in the truck door. It hurt. All right, now before I move on to the new lens, the 35-100, let's just address the question, would I upgrade from the Hasselblad X2D to the X2D II? Well, the answer is simple. If I was a landscape photographer only and I was just doing landscape photography, I don't see any reason why you would want to go to the hassle and expense of upgrading. Yes, it's got more bells and whistles, but it's really not that much of an upgrade that I think it's worth it for people who are just doing landscape photography. This is what annoys me about camera manufacturers, and I'm not just picking on Hasselblad. They all do the same thing, and that is they release these incremental upgrades, meaning that the next generation of this camera is slightly better than the one before, but never so amazing that you just absolutely must upgrade. Typically what I'll do with camera upgrades is I'll wait a couple of generations, and then the improvements, they kind of rack up, and it just becomes a no-brainer. But for most X2D users that do landscape photography, there's not really much point in upgrading to this camera. Now, if you were looking to get into a medium format camera system for the first time and you didn't already have the X2D, then of course you're going to want this camera. It's absolutely fantastic, not just for landscape photography, but portrait photography as well, and travel photography. Just a joy to use, and the image quality is absolutely spectacular. Now that brings me on to another interesting point. I just want to show you this. This is the B&H photo website, and if you look here you'll see this is the brand new X2D II at 7,400 USD, and then below it is the old camera that's more expensive. What's that all about? Now, I don't know anything about retail. I just take pretty pictures and talk smack for a living, but maybe it's because the old camera is actually available, that's actually in stock, whereas the new camera is probably back ordered and it might take a while for it to arrive. I don't know, but I found it very interesting that the newer camera costs less than the older camera. Maybe you can post a comment and explain to me how market forces work, because I haven't got a clue. Now, I've got one grumble about this new camera, a missing feature that I've been requesting for a couple of years now, and I thought they were going to put it in this camera, but they didn't. And that is the ability to record video. Because come on, if you're spending all that money on this camera, it should be able to record video. Think of it, it's got these beautiful lenses that make some absolutely beautiful imagery, then this fantastic sensor. Why wouldn't I want to just hit a record button and capture some beautiful 4K footage while I've got this glass strapped to the camera? And I know what the purists will say. The purists will say,
it's a photographer's camera, only for doing stills.
Well, I've thought of a solution. Why not make an optional firmware update, perhaps even charge for it? And that way you can make it so that the video recording option never even shows up for the purists. But for those of us that want to get the most out of our camera and record some beautiful video footage after we've climbed all the way up a mountain, we should have the ability to get that firmware update and just hit a button and record some absolutely gorgeous video footage, which I know you would enjoy seeing in my videos. All right, now let's talk about the brand new lens, the 35-100 zoom. When they first told me about this, I got very excited, because this is the perfect partner to the 20-35, which if you've been watching my channel long enough, you'll know that that is my go-to wide angle lens. So to have these two together is the perfect combo for landscape photography. And then the other thing about this zoom lens is, if you think about it, this pretty much replaces, let's say, 3 to 4 prime lenses. Now, I do love those Hasselblad prime lenses, but it's far easier to carry around one zoom, even if it is slightly bigger and heavier. Now, I did test this lens in a wide range of different scenarios, and overall I would say that it produces superbly sharp images, but I was more curious about how it would perform against the prime lenses when you shoot wide open and you try and achieve a nice creamy background blur. Would it look anywhere near as good as those gorgeous prime lenses? And I was delighted to discover that it actually performed almost as good. So we've got pretty much the same shot captured with two different lenses. On the left is the 80mm prime shot at f4, and then on the right is the 35-100 zoom at 80mm and again at f4. And you can see that that creamy bokeh in the background, that lovely background blur, is almost as good with the zoom lens. But
I've got to show you some better shots than that. So I went to Iceland and I got a few decent shots. Kind of shots you really want to see. You want to see shots of Cosmo. So these images were shot during blue hour in pretty dim light inside the church, handheld, and that's when the LiDAR really helped to gain focus.
So there you go, that is my 2 cents regarding the new Hasselblad X2D II 100C and the new 35 to 100mm lens. It is a beautiful camera that produces beautiful images and it's a joy to use. In terms of the upgrades, maybe it's not enough of an upgrade to lure many users to upgrade from the X2D, but if you were thinking of getting into medium format for the first time, I don't think you could do better than this camera.